Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, this is my YouTube channel where I talk about pretty much a little bit of everything. So a couple of weeks ago, I posted 2 videos about quarantine romance novels. Cue flashback. So today I figured, why not read one of these novels? Because in that video, I basically just kind of explored them and I only read little excerpts. So today I've decided to read an entire book. So, we are going to be reading Quarantined with the Soldier by Kitty Jones. So, Kitty Jones is very interesting. She wrote like a 3-part book series about quarantine, and I'm gonna guess that they're all pretty much the same book but with different characters. But I picked this one because, I don't know, it just seemed the most interesting to me. It like stood out the most, and also I've seen another YouTube video of someone reading one of her other books. So, we're just gonna jump right in. He's a soldier. She's a baker. They're totally incompatible, totally wrong for each other, and totally locked up together. He didn't plan to be quarantined with her, and she didn't plan for him. Him is italicized, so I'm not sure why there's an emphasis on the word him, but there is. So this book is about a baker. Her name is Ava, and this soldier guy named Dylan, and they were friends when they were younger. That's not necessarily explicitly stated to us, to be honest. It took me a minute to figure that out. But they were friends years ago, and they kind of lost touch when Dylan joined the military. So they haven't talked since. And now Dylan has come back to his hometown, and he and Ava were exposed to the virus. So now they have to quarantine together. There's no chance in hell. Ava stood with her hands on her hips and glared at Dylan like he didn't cared. What she thought. She knew that he didn't, but damn, if that didn't just make her even angrier. You don't have a choice, he said carefully. We've both been exposed to the virus, and it's better for us to be locked up together than quarantined apart. Is that true? Like, why can't they both just go to their own houses? In whose fantasy, she snapped, shaking her head at the soldier. He was handsome as hell, tall, dark, and gorgeous. She loved the way he looked. Really, she did. It was just that Ava wasn't about to walk away from her bakery like it didn't even matter. I'm already thinking so many thoughts. So apparently a customer had come into the shop coughing, and then that customer ended up testing positive. I'm not going, she said. She planted her hands firmly on her hips. Then she stuck her chin out and looked up at him sharply. There, she'd done it. She'd stood up for herself. Oh, sweetheart, he said, stepping closer. You're coming with me. Why does every love interest in these kind of books talk like this? He filled her space. How could one person take up so much space? She didn't understand. He seemed so much bigger than he actually was. No, she said. Why the hell did it sound like a promise? Her words shouldn't have sounded like that. Not to him. Not now. But they did. She didn't know what her words meant. She was trying to say that no, she wouldn't come with him. Instead, it sounded like she was promising him something else. Girl, her tone sounded more like, yes, I would go anywhere with you. She didn't want to say those things to him. Ava, grab your stuff, he said. He turned and walked to the front door of the bakery and locked it and flipped the sign to closed. It didn't matter. The shop was empty. He didn't have to boot anyone out or cause a scene. Nobody was here to see him, and nobody was here to care. But she cared. What is she talking about, she cared? Like, of course she cares. This is my bakery, she whispered. 2 weeks and no buns or croissants or cupcakes or muffins. Yeah, that is a problem. And then he points out that like her employees would have to stay home too, because if they had been into work, then they would also be exposed. So he's being very logical, making a lot of sense. She's just kind of being annoying, but also it's like, I guess, you know, we can understand because this is her business. I'm not doing it, she said again, and she could tell the exact moment when Dylan's patience snapped. He shook his head, marched over to her, and grabbed her on the waist. Okay, she's doing a lot. She's like hype about it. She's excited. "What are you doing?" she squeaked. "Something I should have done an hour ago," he muttered. He slung her over his shoulder and headed to the back of the shop. This is every scene in every romance book ever. "I'm not putting you down, darling," he said. His thick southern drawl was coming out. He kept it so well hidden that sometimes it was easy to forget he was from around here. Oh, so not only is he a soldier, he's also a southern boy. He had been gone a long time and seen a lot of places, but the truth was that Dylan was a southern boy through and through. She needed to remember that. Why? Why does she need to remember that? "Put me down," she demanded, and then she squeaked out when he popped her on the butt. "What the hell? You spanked me, and for good reason. I've got plenty more where that came from, so you just calm your sweet butt down and get in my truck." Ew. Who talks like that? Who says that? Oh my god, it gets worse. "Ava Sue Porter, I will hog tie you and throw you in the back if you even think about running." That's called kidnapping. Okay, so Dylan was a little different now, wasn't he? He was a little bit more wild. Heat pulled in Ava's belly as she thought about his words. Hog tie her? He wanted to tie her up? That's what she got from that? That's all she can think about? "What?" she grunted out. "Drop the attitude," he said. "Nobody likes this, Ava. Nobody. It's not fair and it sucks for all of us." That's true. "It's only 2 weeks and we can survive it." She knew he was right. They had been through worse together, but it had been different. They had just been kids. Now they were adults. Not only were they adults, but Dylan had been in the military. What does this have to do with anything? She had missed her best friend a lot. He was the best thing that ever happened to her, and she didn't want to lose that. She knew he was right. She did have a sourpuss attitude. Do people say that? So she says that the reason her attitude is sourpuss is because Dylan was different. He was more muscular and edgy, and he seemed a little dangerous in all of the best ways. So chapter 2 is in Soldier's point of view. It's still told from third person, but like it's like talking about his thoughts now. It was like Ava hadn't aged a day. He didn't understand how she managed to do it, but somehow she found a way to stay exactly the same. When he had walked into her bakery that morning and she had stopped counting change for a customer, she ran around the counter and completely. Then she had thrown herself into his arms, and that had been the best feeling in the world. She missed him. Being in the military hadn't been easy. He had only seen her in pictures and online. He hadn't seen anyone in the time he had been gone, but he was glad to see Ava. Okay, so here's the part I don't understand. If they're best friends and he's the best thing that ever happened in her life and they were so close, why have they not spoken the entire time he was serving? Like, I know it's probably hard to communicate, but like, they didn't write a single letter. Also, like, where's his family? How do you not speak to anybody? Like, where are his parents? He didn't bother to tell her that all of his belongings were in the back or that he hadn't unpacked at his mama's house. They hadn't talked in years. He had driven by it to get a sneak peek. Okay, I'm starting to understand things a little bit more now. His mother is an alcoholic. But here's what's really crazy to me. So he comes home without a place to stay and he just assumes that he's going to be able to stay with Ava. I'm guessing what happened was that like he went into the bakery and got exposed. So okay, like the staying with Ava thing wasn't planned. But like, let's just say he hadn't been exposed. What was his plan if he wasn't going to stay at his mom's? Her Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter feeds were all pictures of her creations. Sometimes she didn't include... Sometimes she'd include a picture of herself, but most of the time it was all business, all the time. He admired that about her, but he was also worried about her. Didn't Ava have someone who would take care of her? What? So he saw her posting about her business on Facebook and Instagram, and his thought is, oh, she's not in a relationship? Especially at a time like this, he wanted to know that she was being looked after. Was she? So are you seeing anyone? He asked, blurting out the question. He just jumped right to it, huh? She looked at him sharply. Oh, he really, really wanted to look at her. She's mad. Why? What's it to you? She snapped, and he shook his head. Watch the tone, sweetheart, he said. She was bratty. That much was for sure. He had never been with Ava before. I guess he means he's never dated her or like been romantically involved with her. That's such a, I don't know, that sentence has so many meanings. It wasn't that he hadn't wanted to. Oh, he had wanted to since about forever. The problem was that she was innocent and he, that's how shocked I was by this passage. He was, well, he was dark, damaged, broken. He wasn't exactly a good guy. He had weird kinks and fetishes and needs, things that would scare a sweet girl like Ava away if she found out too much about him. I'm really confused. Like, genuinely. Because what does, you know, like, being into, like, BDSM type stuff, like, that doesn't make you a bad person. But she was definitely a brat. So they just, like, go on and start arguing and being annoying. So he spanks her without her consent. She looked at him with a horrified expression on her face. What did you just do? Did you just spank me? She swears at him, so he says, first off, watch the language. I've had enough with that. Good, you're a fast learner. Listen up, Ava. I didn't ask you an incredibly personal question. I asked if you were dating anyone. That's not why I spanked you. You're allowed to have secrets if you don't want to tell me, and that's fine. What I do have a problem with is the fact that you've been snappy and short with me ever since I picked you up. Okay, but that doesn't mean you get to hit people. Like, what? We learned that in first grade. Just because someone says something mean to you doesn't mean you hit them. And I guess that she never told him where she lived. So she says, how'd you know where I live? We wrote letters. And what, you just memorized my address? Something like that. Okay, so at least they did write letters to each other, but then I'm confused. If they were writing letters and speaking consistently, why haven't they seen each other in however long it's been? Also, they never mention how long it's been. Like, how long was he in the military and, like, away from her? We don't know. I mean, to be honest, it doesn't matter, but maybe it was weird. Yeah, I think it's definitely weird to, like, memorize someone's address when you haven't spoken to them in, like, probably years. I think most people would consider that weird, but it wasn't like he had planned to. It just wasn't that hard for him to memorize things anymore. Stuff just came easy to him, and addresses were one of those things. Besides, this was Ava. I like how they both keep saying that. They're like, this is Dylan, this is Ava, my best friend. But they also don't at all act like they were so close. They don't act like they were best friends. Like, they don't really, I don't know, they don't seem that close to me. She's impressed that he remembers. What are you impressed about? That you remembered where I live. It's not that difficult. It's not really that big of a town. I'm sure anyone would remember where you live. Oh, so Dylan says that to her. I'm sure anyone would remember where you live. Nah, she shook her face. Nobody else has ever remembered. He looked at her carefully. Does that mean you've had some lovers, Ava? Who says that? He wanted to know. A few. Does that bother you? No. Why not? Why would it bother me? He asked carefully. You like me, she pointed out. You spanked me on the butt, Dylan. You wouldn't do that to someone you didn't like. Wouldn't he? He laughed and shook his head. I'm not jealous and I do like you. Now let's go inside. So when they walked inside, Ava was suddenly very aware of how small her house was. It wasn't designed for a big, strong soldier like Dylan. The funniest thing about this is that she continues to refer to him as big and strong. I'm like, okay, I get it. He's tall and big and muscular. Like, I understand. But every time his name is mentioned, it's like big, edgy, tall, strong, muscular Dylan. It's just like a list of, like, cool adjectives that would describe any bad boy Wattpad love interest. It certainly wasn't designed to be quarantined with him for a long time. I don't think any house would be designed for that, but okay. Not that 2 weeks was a long time, not in the grand scheme of things. Oh, it wasn't going to be the best experience. It wasn't going to be sunshine and roses and rainbows and happiness. She wasn't an idiot.
Are you sure about that?
I'd be willing to argue that. The problem was that Dylan and Ava had been exposed, which meant that they were potentially able to infect other people. They'd be quarantined for 2 weeks, and as long as they didn't show any symptoms, they'd be able to return to their real lives. Good, that was what she wanted. Okay, so this all makes sense, but what happened before that I'm confused about. Like, what is she talking about? It wasn't going to be sunshine and roses and rainbows. Like, does she just mean living with him? Like, is she trying to say he's hard to live with? Or is she trying to say it's going to be hard because, like, there's a pandemic going on? She looked over at Dylan, stealing a peek at his muscular body. He didn't look like that when he had left for the military. He had never been ugly, but he also hadn't had that dark, handsome aesthetic he had now. Was he the kind of guy who got a lot of action? Probably. He was handsome as hell and he was charming too. I'd argue that he's not charming, but he might be a little more bossy now. A little more, just a little more bossy. But he was still the same guy she remembered, and that's what she was afraid of. With him around, she might be lucky to do anything except lie in her bed all day and, you know, do inappropriate things. Dylan didn't think of her in a sexual way, did he? He had spanked her. That had to count as a little bit of attraction, she reckoned. Then again, maybe not. Maybe that was just what all soldiers were doing these days. I would hope not, because that sounds like a lawsuit. Maybe they loved spanking people who were being naughty and mouthy. Maybe that was part of the fun of being a soldier. Girl, that is not what soldiers do. I'm not a soldier and I've never been one, but I'm pretty sure that they don't do this. He calls her house pretty, and she's like really hype about that. And they go into a lot of detail about her house. She's very artsy and quirky, so you know her house is filled with like antique things and like it's very eccentric and it's very like, you know, what an artsy person would kind of. So she's like very excited and hyped that he likes her house. Would Dylan be able to appreciate that? Could he understand something like this? She wasn't under the impression that her lifestyle was something a lot of people could handle. Especially not someone like Dylan. Okay, what about her lifestyle so wild and crazy? It just sounds like she is, I guess, disorganized? But not even. It says that her house is clean. It's just like full of knickknacks. So Dylan had always been very careful and cautious with every decision he made. He never drank a lot. He never partied much. He had always just been reliable. And there she was, not very reliable. There she was, wild and crazy. Could the two of them ever work? Would he ever want them to? I don't get what's so wild and crazy about her. She's done nothing that sounds wild or crazy. She was letting her imagination run wild, or maybe that was just her vagina thinking for her. I can't believe that that's an actual line. She wasn't sure whether she actually liked him or whether she liked the idea of making love to anyone, and he just happened to be there. So they talk about like his time in the military a little bit, and he talks about how the military can be like pretty restrictive because, you know, of the situation you're in. So she says, I guess that's true. She had never really thought about those restrictions. Maybe she had always just taken her lifestyle for granted. Was that wrong of her? Was it a bad thing that she'd always just sort of floated by? I don't get why she feels so, why she's like reflecting so heavily. Like, she says that she has, because she runs her own business, she has the luxury of like kind of choosing her own hours. And apparently he hadn't had those luxuries, but like, I don't get why she feels so bad. Like, he chose to serve. Like, this was his choice. I'll always have those years to look back on with fond memories, but it'll be nice to have more control over what I do now. Control seems to be important to you, she said carefully. She had never been spanked before. She had liked it a little bit. She didn't think she was supposed to, but she did. Maybe that made her a freak, but she wasn't sure. Either way, Ava hadn't missed the fact that Dylan had been completely in control over what was happening. At no point had he gotten angry, yelled, or hurt her, and it had been a very valuable lesson to her. He valued respect. He valued her. Does he? I mean, he hasn't done anything like super questionable. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. Because I'd argue that spanking someone without their consent is questionable. And then, this is so funny. This is the most like indecisive character I've ever read. Like, she says he valued respect. He valued her. At least she thought he did. Same with the, I like Dylan. I've liked him since we were best friends. And I can't tell if I like him or if I just am hormonal. Like, I'm really confused. In some ways, he finally said. He looked at her carefully, as though he was choosing his words with an abundance of caution. Was he trying to be gentle with her? She suddenly had the idea that he thought she was frail. What kind of reach? So she asks, sexually? Are you propositioning me? And then literally after, this girl is like, how dominant is he? I want him to spank me again. She says, Ava wasn't sure if sex was something she wanted to do with Dylan. I mean, that's like fair, but make up your mind. Did she really want to make love to someone like him? They're acting like he's like a murderer and a criminal, and literally he was just like, yeah, like I'm kind of into some like dom stuff. No, she said, are you sure? Yes. What good dialogue. She had heard whispers before of things people like Dylan wanted to do in the bedroom. Naughty things. Things like that. Oh, things like that spanking. Okay. I was like, what does this even mean? That's fine, Dylan said. I'm not going to make you do anything you don't want to do, and I'm not here with any expectations. Oh. Well, that's nice. Okay, that's good. You aren't? Was it really possible that a guy would want to stay with her but not expect anything from her? How had she gotten so lucky to end up as a... How had she gotten so lucky as to end up with a friend like him? Why is she acting like she doesn't know him? Like, if this was really your friend, your best friend from childhood, wouldn't you know that he's a decent guy and that he doesn't take advantage of women? Like, especially you, his friend, his, like, childhood best friend. Why would he want to take advantage of you? Kitty Jones, girl, did you think about this? Maybe I just am, maybe I'm too invested. Ava, I missed you. You're my favorite person in the world. I just wish you take care of yourself, he said carefully. What was that supposed to mean? I mean, same. What was that supposed to mean? She did take... Sorry, I can't read. She did take care of herself. Or couldn't he tell? So then she kind of just goes on and is like... She has this little like moment where she's like, I run my business. I pay my employees. I'm on top of it. And I'm here for it. But literally the next paragraph, she says, then again, maybe having someone like Dylan around would be nice. Would she like having someone with her who could watch her back? Who could guard her? Maybe she just loved having someone around who could be there for her. Who just always looked after her. Do you need a mother? Oh, she justifies this. Oh my God, I can't even like understand her logic. She justifies her logic of like, having someone like Dylan around would be great because he's a good person, because he said he doesn't have any expectations of me, and he ordered groceries for the house, which was good and responsible of him. But she's literally just like, do I want to be in a relationship with him because he's nice? I mean, that's a fair question. I'll leave her alone. I'll stop dragging her. I missed you too. It seemed like you were gone forever. Did you think I'd changed? He asked her carefully. You have changed a little, she pointed out. He exuded pure sexuality these days. I guess she means pure. He hadn't been like that before. Don't worry, darling. I've only changed in the very best ways. I promise. Oh, Lord. So he hugs her and she acts as if it's like the most intense feeling she's ever had in her life. Oh, she could get used to this, she realized, melting against him. He smelled just as good as he felt, and suddenly she wanted more. More than anything was to kiss him. The thought scared her, and she pushed him away. The guest room. I'll show you the guest room. I would be honored to stay in your guest room, he said. Thank you. She started walking quickly, guiding him to the room, but all the while she was wondering whether he knew that her underwear had become soaked.